Hi there, Lynn Cox here, clinical hypnotherapist. I help adult women overcome symptoms of violence and abuse, including after they've left a domestic violence situation or perhaps experienced abuse as a child and are dealing with common symptoms in adulthood as a result. Anyway, I want to jump right into it. I want to share some insights and information on some common questions and issues that come up. One thing that I have heard and seen quite often with people who have experienced abuse as children, particularly sexual abuse, is this idea, this want to um, to address it with the person who abused them, essentially confront the person who abused them. And a lot of confusion and a lot of questions around that and a lot of pain. It's a very challenging decision and step and question really for people to have in their minds. The abuse at a young age is traumatic enough, and it can result in issues later in life. There are definitely ways to address those issues, though. Really, there are, to heal more and to enjoy life more, to have better relationships, to be able to be intimate, to have better health, to regain that ability to soothe your nervous system, to recall memories if you want to, and to get a different perspective. I talked about this idea of being able to transcend and to really create a life experience that is more in line with what you would want for yourself. Sometimes the first place is thinking about what would you want for somebody that you really love, if there's a young person in your life, or just somebody who you really love and care about. Anyway, on the question of confronting the abuser, there's a few things I just like to ask people to consider. Number one, and I'm going to use the child sexual abuse example here because this is where it often seems to come up the most. Sometimes when women have left a domestic violence situation, but more often when it's this issue of something being done to you as a child. And I'd ask yourself a couple of questions. Why is it that you feel this may be something that would be helpful to you? These are just questions to consider. This is not saying that it's wrong to have the desire to do that, but it's just spending a little bit of time asking yourself. There are some instances where it really may make sense in a different kind of format or different degree. If there is concern that other children or people are at risk, that's a very unique situation. It's always the responsibility of whoever would do such, and I will call them horrendous and horrific things. Abusing a child in that way, in my opinion, is absolutely one of the most evil things a person can do. I don't spend time trying to understand the psychology of that. It is really twisted and evil and pretty impossible, I think, for most decent human beings to understand. So if this person has access to children in their life, I mean, most predators will seek access to children. And so that's something that is often not in your control. It could be the case though that they're a family member and they have children themselves or grandchildren or nieces and nephews, or perhaps they're a coach for a team. Perhaps they have run a business where they have access to children. So that's a question mark. And then that's something you have to answer for yourself. But to keep in mind, it would never be your responsibility if they would in future or if they had in past committed those acts on somebody else. That's got to rest entirely with them. However, it may be the case where not necessarily that you'd want to confront them per se, but perhaps be reporting it to police authorities, to other family members, to people within that network if there is the issue of risk at hand. That's a tough one to do, um, but there are ways to work at it so you don't feel that it's your responsibility if something were to happen. A lot of people do not ever address or disclose these things, and sometimes when they do it much, much later in life, and sometimes they do feel feelings of guilt. There are ways to work around that because none of the guilt should rest with a person who was assaulted as a child and then had to deal with the weight of that in these tough decisions. So, that's a question you might want to ask. Are there other children who likely were impacted, or you're concerned about being impacted in future? Number two would be I would never expect to get an apology, an admission, or an explanation. People who do these types of things, it's something that would be far too, I think, difficult to understand, nor would most people want to really understand that. And so if there's a hope somewhere, like if it was somebody who is a family member or a close friend where they should have treated you with care, respect, nurturing, etc., just ask yourself and go deep into yourself and see if you're expecting any of those things, an admission or an apology or some kind of an explanation, because you're very likely setting yourself up for a great deal more pain than is really necessary. So just, there are ways to kind of stop and take pause, be able to relax a little bit, to kind of bring it down, and then really just ask yourself, because you're ultimately the authority on any decision that you make, any step that you take, any perspective that you have. You really are the ultimate authority. But these are just worthwhile questions to ask. So, are you expecting some kind of admission, apology, or explanation? And I would suggest that it's unlikely to happen. I have seen cases where, you know, somebody who's sexually assaulted by her father did try to um, tell the mother and was called a liar. There have been cases when people have tried to bring charges, and because of the length of time and the lack of evidence that's required sometimes, and then the lack of admission of whoever the perpetrator was, where it hasn't, where justice, will say, wasn't brought. So it can be very difficult for people to deal with, and it can be a tough question, and it's something a lot of people struggle with. Some people struggle with the fact that they felt like they wanted to do that, and then their perpetrator ended up passing away, because often there's a wide age difference, and so people have had perpetrators who have passed away and then regret not confronting while they were still alive. And there are ways to work through that as well, to really, really, really focusing on your own life, your own wellness, your own health, your own perspective, seeking ways to be able to make a different meaning of that part of your life and what happened. Those tend to be the healthiest ways, and really working with your body and really working with your breath. These things can all be, sorry, this is Jimmy behind me. These can all be extremely helpful. But these are things that people really struggle with. And then if it's the case that it was within the family unit, there are other considerations as far as what will happen to the family dynamic if it's known. A lot of people struggle to look at painful truths, so that is something to keep in mind. Not only how would the perpetrator respond, but everybody else within that unit and that dynamic. It sometimes very much doesn't work out well for the person who brings the truth to light from that perspective. To shake up the dynamic, to bring things to the surface, is very difficult often for others around to acknowledge these difficult truths. So it is an enormous amount of pressure, strain, anxiety, confusion. A lot of people feel feelings of guilt, remorse, should have said something earlier, wish I would have done that before they passed away, etc. There's no right answer though. Everybody is their own authority. There are ways to tune into that and really turn the focus back inward and working on having as happy, peaceful, and healthy of a life as you possibly can. That is where energies are typically much better spent. But that is a confusion circle that a lot of people spin around in, and for many years. It doesn't have to be that way though. So those are my thoughts on that. I'm wishing everybody health, vitality, and joy. Bye for now.